Hey folks, this is Neil with Blackberry Botanicals, and I wanted to just kind of put a video out there that kind of shares our story and our experience with Mountain Valley Pipeline. We have a organic farm up here in the mountains of West Virginia, not too far from Hinton, and we've tried to work with Mountain Valley Pipeline quite a bit in relation to a small easement that goes across the front of our property, and just being cordial with their guys and whatnot. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference whether you're working with them or you're not working with them or working against them. They put their profits and their right of way and their right to destroy things before anybody else. So the background to the story is we had just received our organic certification. In August, we did our inspection with the Pennsylvania Certified Organic. We've been working for almost 4 years to get our farm ready for organic certification. Organic certification in our industry is a little bit different than your standard farm crops. You know, we do forest-grown medicinals, things like ginseng, golden seal, Solomon seal, black and blue cohosh, as well as a variety of other things that are not your typical crops. And so we spent a lot of time organizing and getting things ready for this certification. And on the 7th of September, me, 4 of my children, and one of my interns were out in the woods. We were harvesting some ginseng off of our property, as well as planting berries from the ginseng seeds and making sure that they would be well set to grow. And we experienced a helicopter flying overhead at a very low altitude. And of course, my children were excited. It's not very often that you get to see a helicopter flying over at a low altitude. And everybody was looking up. And about 3 seconds after the helicopter passed over the top of us, these little blue pellets started raining down and pelting us. A couple of my children were injured on the face with lacerations from these pellets striking them. And I had a pretty good idea that it was, once I saw what it was and had an idea of where it was flying, that these were headed for the right-of-way on Mountain Valley Pipeline on the property across from us, on the neighboring property. And I called my representative for Mountain Valley Pipeline, Bob Bell, who is, the land agent for this area, and let him know what was going on. And I called the FERC landowner hotline and filed a complaint. And Bob Bell sent me a information sheet on the product EarthGuard Edge, which didn't have a lot of detail on it. It wasn't really a true MSDS or a MSD, material safety data sheet. I think they're called ASDs now. But we tried to get as much information as we could, but this helicopter made another 12 to 15 passes the same day, continuing to drop these pellets on our organic farm. And we didn't see them again till after we had met with FERC and 3 agents from Mountain Valley Pipeline. We met with Bob Bell, another land agent and their environmental specialist, and a representative from FERC. And it was 10 days after my original call. And we took them down and showed them where the pellets were being dropped. That was very, very plainly over 1/4 mile away from where the right-of-way was. And in discussing this with the land agents, they looked me in the eye. They said, "We're really sorry. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again." I spoke with the environmental specialist, and I said, "Is there anything that can be done to clean this up?" He said, "No. Once these pellets are wet, there is absolutely nothing we can do. They swell up. They go into the ground. That's what they're made to do." And FERC said they would file a report, for what it's worth, I'm not going to share my opinion on what FERC does, but it didn't seem to do any good. So the next day, that was the 18th of September when we met, the 19th and 20th, the helicopter continued to fly over our property and drop more pellets. I called Bob Bell again from the pipeline. I called FERC and let them know FERC didn't feel the need to come back out. But Bob and Zach, the other land agent, came out, and I took Zach down on the opposite side of my property, and we were close to a half-mile away, over a half-mile away from where their right-of-way was on the backside of my property. And we showed them pellets all along this path where they've dumped pellets over approximately 90 to 95% of my property. And, you know, it's an extreme slap in the face to look a man in the eye and say, we're sorry, it won't happen again. And the very next day, come back and drop these pellets all over what they know is an organic farm. You know, I don't have words to describe the anger that we feel. I can tell you that sitting on the sideline is not the answer. If you're sitting on the sideline from this, saying, you know, I really don't want to be involved, your family, your friends, your neighbors, your community, these people are being abused and taken advantage of by this pipeline company that is not held accountable. We called the prosecuting attorney's office. We called the sheriff's office. We called the state patrol. Nobody was willing to do anything about about the dropping of these pellets, which if you or I took these things and we dropped them on our neighbor's property, we would face criminal charges. They would not hesitate to press charges against us. But because this is a big corporation, they don't want to touch it. They're not willing to file charges. And it's a shame, because why should these corporations be held to any different standards than you or I? You know, it's really about accountability, and it's very clear that the government agencies and the local agencies are not going to hold Mountain Valley Pipeline accountable. And from what I've heard, similar activities are happening with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and it's a shame. So you need to get active. You need to do what you can to be involved with protesting and the legal battles and just sharing this information so that more and more people are aware. It may not be a battle that's won in court. It may be a long-term battle, but ultimately the court of public opinion is what matters. That's why we're doing this video. That's why we're sharing our story. We want people to be aware that these companies don't care. They're not accountable. They're not responsible. And ultimately, the only thing that matters to them is that this project gets done so their profits can start to come in. And, you know, we have a lot to think about. You know, this is the view from my house. You know, we have 115 acres up here. This is why we bought this place. It's beautiful. It's a place that I want my children to grow up in. It's a place that I want them to be able to inherit. And, you know, what do we do now? You know, we've got this pipeline cutting through us. We're in a blast zone no matter what we do. We were in the blast zone if we didn't sell our right-of-way because our neighbors had sold. And, you know, we need to do something. We need to stand up for ourselves. We need to stand up for others, because there are the people that can't stand up for themselves. And I can't stress enough how important it is for you to get off the sidelines and get out there and help these people and help everybody in your community by fighting these pipelines and doing what you can do to help us get a stop and a stay of execution on the properties and the lands that they're stealing through eminent domain, and the abuses that they're committing across the Appalachian region in general. So, folks, that's it for now. If you have questions, you can reach out to us. My name is Neil LaFerrier. You can find me on Facebook. You can find us through our Facebook page, Blackberry Botanicals. You know, we love sharing our story. If people want to hear more, you know, if there's questions that you guys have, or maybe you want to do a story on this because you're a reporter, you know, we'd be happy to share that, because